Welcome to Scrubbed In, the DVM Journey, the podcast where we dive into the wild, rewarding, and sometimes unpredictable world of becoming a doctor of veterinary medicine. I'm your host, Grace Gaynor, a current third-year veterinary student at the Virginia, Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine. Whether you're an aspiring vet, a vet student, or just passionate about animals, this is your backstage pass into becoming a DVM. From classroom to clinic, we're sharing the insights, tips, and real-life experiences to help you thrive on your journey to becoming a vet. So scrub in, and let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of Scrubbed In. I'm your host, Grace Gaynor, and today I'm jumping up and down because today I get to introduce you all to my dear friend, Emi Jones, who is a current third-year veterinary student at the Virginia, Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine. Emi, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Grace. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, as always, I like to begin by asking about how you came to be a veterinary student. So, Emi, tell us about your journey to veterinary medicine.
Well, like every small veterinary student, I always joke that it started when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Because I was that 5-year-old girl that was obsessed with cats and bugs and dead squirrels, and really just was obsessed with becoming a vet from a very young age. But it turns out I was not excellent at chemistry or physics, and so I kind of veered away from the vet path and decided to pursue the sociology path, and I was going to be a professional creative writer. That was my career goal. But I got into a great MFA program in New York and then had a giant mental breakdown and left my creative writing program and moved to the mountains of Virginia, where I slowly started farming and having a child, taking online classes, and then getting into vet school. So that's what I've been doing.
What a journey. I definitely think you can offer us a really unique perspective as how you began this journey and as you began as a producer. And soon you'll be on the other side of things as a veterinarian. So can you talk to us a little bit more about your experience as a producer?
Sure. So I obviously did not grow up on a farm. I'm from Chicago. I grew up in the suburbs like many of us. But I, during my MFA program, was writing a novel about sheep farmers in rural Oregon. And when I made the switch to living very rurally, I kind of realized that I wanted to be the sheep farmers. I did not want to write about being the sheep farmers. So we started with chickens and we got sheep and we slowly worked our way up to the farm. And I decided that I really wanted to, instead of just like pretending to doctor my sheep as a producer, which you are fixing them and you're making a lot of decisions for your flock, but you don't get to do surgeries and you don't get to prescribe medications and you're not really understanding the true effects of what's going on with your sheep. Or any of your animals. And so I decided that I really wanted to do something else with my life.
Yeah. My next question pretty much is following up on what you just said, but what specifically motivated you to make the leap from sheep production into veterinary school?
That is a really tricky question. When COVID happened, I was working at a dairy, and 2020 and COVID were just a crazy time. I was farming full-time and working at the dairy part-time. And then my wife had a pottery business, which was our actual income for our household, which dried up overnight when COVID happened. So we had no income, and we already had a child, one child. And we were just kind of like really not doing great. We were living in the middle of nowhere and trying to work on, trying to make ends meet on my sad salary because farming did not pay our bills. We were trying very hard, but it did not. We had a very small property. So I started expanding the farm very quickly, which was easy because my mother had just purchased a property across the street. So we started ramping up production very quickly, and all of a sudden I could see a future for myself in farming. At the same time, I was working with these interns at the dairy from Malawi, and they kind of encouraged me to go back to school because I had always talked about it with them. I was always like, I really want to do this, but I feel like I'm too old. It's too late for me. I have nothing to offer. I'll never get in because it's impossible. And they really encouraged me. I had also met this mentor. I was interested in sheep dairying, and I was actually considering creating a career out of that as well. And so I went to a sheep dairy conference in 2018. And I met this guy there who was a pork geneticist.
Oh, cool.
And he had a PhD. And we maintained contact over social media in the next couple years. And in 2020, I messaged him and wanted to chat about careers. And I messaged him and we FaceTimed because, obviously he lives in the Midwest and I was on the East Coast. And also COVID. So we FaceTimed and chatted about careers in science and veterinary medicine, and kind of like what that would look like, how I could get there, and what that meant. And so between all of those things and kind of like being forced to say, maybe I need to be the sole provider for our household and trying to figure out, what to do with my life, I said, I'm going to be on the path towards vet school. And I applied for community college, got into some courses so I could get my prerequisites, because obviously I didn't have a strong science background at that point, and started the long process. It was fall of 2020 when I started the process of sort of, I need to go back to school, I need to get my prereqs, and I need to get my life together so that I can start applying to vet school.
Wow. And so were you taking classes while being a full-time producer?
Yes. It's not that hard because it was online because of COVID. Yeah. And so I would just do all the things I needed to do for the farm in between when I would get on Zoom and go to my course lecture, or we would have a lot of things that were asynchronous, so we could just kind of take the quizzes or the tests whenever we got ready. Yeah. And that was pretty cool. My biology was I just studied off of a textbook. I really appreciated it because it was easy for me to fit my child and my farm. I also was helping out with the pottery business. Yeah. Because by 2021, it had started to pick up again. Okay. Thank goodness. Yeah. So we kind of were piecing everything together, trying to make a living while I was going to school. My mother-in-law was our babysitter. It was great. It was good times.
Yeah. It's so funny. You say, it was so easy. It was really easy, but it was not. I can imagine super easy. You were a producer. You had a child. That is crazy that you were doing all of those things at once. And I'm glad that being able to do that online made it more accessible for you, but wow, you really put in the work to apply. Absolutely incredible. I love your story. How has your background in sheep production influenced your approach to veterinary medicine, especially in large animal or food animal practice?
This one is a good question. I really appreciate this question. I think it's really important. Yeah. I wish we could find more vet students that had farm experience. Yes. It's much rarer these days to find kids that grew up on farms. Yes. And you hear all these old vets, they're like, I grew up on a dairy farm, or I grew up on this giant beef farm. And it's really hard to find people with that ag perspective in vet school. But I think it's really important, and it does color your ability to kind of see the questions and the perspectives. For me, we raised a lot of animals. Yeah. I think we not only raised sheep, but we had a small cattle operation going. It was 9 mamas. And so it was a cow-calf operation where we just sold the babies off the moms and did some beef shares and that type of thing. And then we had sheep and some goats, but I am not a goat person. And we did hogs. We had a couple of breeding hogs every year. We'd do feeders, and then we ended up with lots of breeder hogs at one point. Chickens, turkeys, the works. So when I'm in vet school, I feel like having a producer's perspective actually gives me a new level of empathy for the producer and or owner of these animals, especially I feel like in our profession, we tend to kind of talk down about producers and owners because we're very frustrated with them throughout our experiences. But I feel like I have this really strong sense of empathy from being on the other side so long and so hardcore. And I feel like I can always see their perspective and their decision making, especially, there's like financial, cultural differences, and then there's also just like pure ignorance of like they just literally don't know better. And so they can't make better decisions unless they know better. And so we're here to help them and educate them, and in a way that is respectful. So I feel like that's an important thing to have when you're out in the world as a vet.
Yeah, absolutely. I really value your perspective, and I think it is really important to have empathy. And I know that when we're in school and we're learning the gold standard of care for a lot of different cases, it can be difficult to try to bring that gold standard into farm animal medicine, but the reality is a lot of times that's not feasible. So I think it is really important to have that empathy and that respect that you're talking about when working with producers. So thank you for sharing that. Now that you're deep into your veterinary studies, let's talk about your academic and hands-on experiences. How do you think your practical knowledge from farming has helped you in clinical rotations and your coursework?
So, funny enough, I guess it's helpful because I do tend to coast on my sheep knowledge. I'm kind of like, I know these diseases. I don't have to worry as much about that. The nice thing is the practical stuff. Like, I do know how to restrain a sheep.
Yes.
I don't know as much as I think I do. Having 9 cows isn't exactly a major beef operation. So when I go work cattle and they have like hundreds of cows and they're expecting me to like know how to operate a chute and a head gate, which I never had. It's a little bit intimidating, but I definitely rely on it when we talk about disease processes that I've worked through in the past as well. And I like bust out my dumb farm stories and zoonotic stories constantly. So that's always helpful to kind of make it real. Yeah,
for sure. I remember some of the stories you shared.
Ooh, those zoonotics.
Some of those things happened to you, and you're like, oh no. Do you have a picture? Anyways, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something I am so excited to hear about. But this summer, you had the opportunity to do one of your clinical externships abroad in Africa, and I really want to hear more about this experience. So can you share a memorable case or challenge you faced during your externship in Africa?
Sure. So we went to South Africa, and we flew into Johannesburg and sort of drove toward the northeast, and we're in these parks. That was primarily what we did. And a lot of the parks have vets on staff, or they have vet practices that they use that are locally and nearby. But we were very rural. One of the cases that was the saddest for me, and apparently that makes it the most memorable, was when we were actually just on safari heading to a vet clinic where we were going to get a lecture, which was common, where we had these interesting sort of public corporate type lectures. We encountered a herd of elephants, also not uncommon. We were in Kruger Park at the time, which is overpopulated with elephants. And so we ran into elephants constantly. It was literally almost ran into them with our bus.
Oh my gosh.
Like we would come up on the road and there would just be elephants everywhere. It was great. But there was a baby elephant that was limping, and when we looked closer, it had a snare stuck around its foot that was like, cutting off circulation, and its foot was not doing well. And snares are used for poaching. I don't know how much people know about it, but these giant reserves, it's really hard to manage who's coming in and out of the park constantly because it's huge, and they don't have the security for like every single piece of the perimeter. And there's also these people that are local to these areas that actually will know the area better than a lot of the people that work in the park. So they're setting these snares, and a lot of times they don't even go back and check them.
What?
Sometimes they're just I'll talk about it later. But sometimes they're just doing these things. They're not even trying to catch the animals for meat. They're specifically catching them for these weird sort of medicinal purposes. But in this case, the snare probably wasn't for an elephant. The snare was for something else. But in this case, the baby elephant got the worst end of the deal. And we were not allowed to intervene in this baby elephant because obviously the mother was standing right there. She would have tried to kill us. The whole herd would have tried to kill us. But also, we have to, like, there's a order of operations for this where you have to contact the veterinary professionals, and then they have to contact the other people that work at the park, and they make a plan, and then they go out and find the animals, and they determine, oh yes, there was human intervention in this injury, and therefore we can help it, but first they have to find it. So by the time we got to the vet's office and we're talking to them, obviously the baby elephant was gone off the road, and it was going to take them days, and you knew that it was going to be suffering out there. And it was just really heartbreaking because it's like, there's only so much you can do. We, and specifically we, weren't allowed to intervene at all in that particular case. And that was really hard, for sure, to see that and not be able to help, because that's your first instinct.
Yeah, that is a really very interesting story, and I think that is important to understand too if you're interested in like conservation medicine and working with wildlife, because I'm sure that can occur in other places too. But that poor elephant, hopefully she got the help she needed. And hopefully she's not in pain. But interesting case. How did the veterinary practices there differ from those in the US?
This is also interesting because when I did this trip, most of the practices were extremely rural. And so we can't, like, I can't compare to the practices that are in Johannesburg that are more urban and more small animal focused. So I'm trying to kind of equate them to like the weird rural large animal practices that we have out here. There's nothing like it, you know, there's not a true comparison, but for sure it was very similar to the very rural, very remote large animal practices that we have here. Where a lot of the equipment, I said, is jerry-rigged, where it's like they're just like coming up with stuff, constantly sawing PVC into new shapes so that they can create different apparatuses, even for like restraining animals or literally for transporting anesthesia machines out into the field in the back of their trucks. One of the things that we noted was that a huge problem is the back-ordered medication. They have a lot of problems accessing medications and sterile medical supplies, and they often can't get them in. They just can't get them into the country. So that's actually a huge issue. But I think we have the problem now, and I don't know if it's always been this way, but we have shortages as well. So there's a lot of things that are still on back order here as well. Maybe it's not so different for sure. But overall, the vets were kind of working in the same way that we were working here, just trying to save animals with whatever they have. So it was interesting, for sure.
Yeah, that kind of mirrors my experience in Nicaragua. We definitely did not have access to a lot of sterile supplies. We had to work with what we had, and it was difficult, but it was interesting to see how even when you don't practice maybe the gold standard of medicine, you can still help a lot of patients. We were still able to perform a lot of surgeries as most sterile as we could with what we had, and a lot of the patients did really well. So it was still a successful trip, and it was good to see that you can adapt and still help animals even if it's not completely the way that we do it here in the US.
Yeah, for sure.
Were there any animal or public health issues that really stood out to you during your time there?
Yeah, the biggest one for sure, and I'll go into the background a little bit, there's these mass poisonings of vultures, and there's a bunch of poaching that happens all over the parks in South Africa, and I'm sure around the world. But the thing that really struck me was the fact that no one cares about vultures. They're ugly. They're birds. You know, people aren't that interested in birds. People like the big five, like they like mammals and carnivores, and they like elephants. People love elephants. And they're what is the wildlife people, they always say they're sexy, where they're just like the very exciting, interesting species that everyone gravitates towards. And it's really sad because there's these vultures that are constantly getting massively poisoned. People will go out and they will poison these carcasses that are like dead cattle, and then they will wait for the vultures to come, and the vultures will come and eat the carcass and die. And the reason they're doing this is because of these like muti rituals that are basically like sacred old medicine. But in this case, this medicine is using animal parts, and so the vultures, they use the brains and the feet and other parts of these animals for these rituals. And so they're basically like taking these pieces of they don't care that the animals are poisoned. They just then take these vultures, sell them to the medicine man locally. And the medicine man then sells them in turn to the community for doing all these rituals with them. So like the brains are used to like see your future or whatever. And there's different things that can like provide you with luck or good fortune or money or fertility. And so there's all these rituals with different animal parts. But the vultures were huge because dozens and dozens of them are killed constantly for these. And it's definitely horrible to see because there's a bunch of injured vultures all the time in the rehab facilities. And a lot of times if they can get there, they have special methods where they can like pump the crop and administer certain antidotes depending on, usually I think it's organophosphates that they were using to fertilize, but different things to fertilize. Fertilizers that they've used as poison that then of course kill the vultures. But there's different things. So yeah, that was definitely kind of a cultural issue that, you know, you can't sit here and say, you can sit there and say you can't perform these rituals anymore, but they don't. It's protected in South Africa because it's considered a cultural phenomenon. So it just also means that there's a lot of poaching of certain animals going on still for that medicine market, basically.
Wow. That is so interesting. I've never heard of such a thing. Poor vultures. Yeah, they might not be the prettiest animals, but they deserve to be treated with respect just like any other animal. So that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. How do you hope to incorporate what you learned in Africa into your future veterinary work?
I feel like I had a nice perspective on how to sedate, transport, and not get killed by the giant game species. And I think that's really appropriate for cattle work, honestly. That's the same things you have to worry about with cattle. I think a lot of people take for granted that we have facilities and we have ways to restrain the cattle, so we're not scared of cattle, but we should be scared of cattle. Yeah. They do kill a lot of people every year, and cows are big and dangerous, so I do like to imagine that I got some practical knowledge about the appropriate ways to restrain large animals. And we had definitely learned more than I expected about these like transboundary, transfrontier diseases that are happening in South Africa at the game reserves and the interface between the reserves and the local communities. There's a lot of zoonotic disease that passes from humans and livestock, but also wildlife and humans. And there's also wildlife and livestock passing disease to each other. There's crop devastation by wildlife. So that's always a problem. And then there's a ton of poaching. So there's a lot of interesting things going on disease-wise and culturally that we learned about. And I think that's going to become more of an issue in this country as well, as humans continue to expand from urban areas to rural areas, and we continue to use up more and more of our natural resources in this country. We're going to see a lot more zoonotic disease, especially as we kind of get global warming, bringing the vectors of this disease, different tick-borne illnesses, and I think that we're going to see a lot more of these issues that they already have going on in South Africa coming to this country as we move forward. So I think that's really important for us all to be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, and one thing I want to mention too is I think that sometimes in America we can idealize Africa as a place where animals are truly in their natural habitat, which is true, but we kind of idealize it in a way where it's not actually the safe haven for all animals. There are pros and cons to it. Like you said, there's a lot of transmission of diseases between farm animals, which in Africa, those people depend on their farm animals to live because that's the source of their food and income and things like that. But it's also like there's poaching going on and stuff like that. So I know that some people in America maybe are against zoos and things like that, but there are still issues in Africa with those, even in their natural habitat, all those animals are still facing poaching and things like that. And it's not necessarily always safe for humans too, because there are a lot of zoonotic diseases being transmitted. So it's not really as perfect as people seem to think. So I'm glad that you shared that perspective as well. In addition to being a student and world traveler, you're also a mom of 2. I can imagine that's a really big part of your identity, and you've already mentioned that a little bit. So let's talk about how that experience intersects with your career. How do you balance the demands of vet school with parenting 2 children?
Yeah, I definitely don't appropriately balance.
Love the honesty.
Somebody had this metaphor, I don't remember, somebody had this metaphor of like the juggling the balls, and like sometimes you got to know which ball you can drop without it breaking. So don't drop those glass ones. Drop the rubber balls. But that's how it is, where it's like sometimes I can't, no one can spend 24 hours a day with their children. Well, I'm sure some people can. I can't spend 24/7 with my kiddos. Shout out to my incredible wife who literally does everything with the children constantly. I definitely could not do that job, and she makes it possible for me to actually do my job, which is being in vet school, being a student. And I do feel like it's like the hardest part of the whole thing is like you have a really hard, difficult day. You come home and you have to be present and kind with your family and your children. But then it's also like, that is also the best part, because you come home and suddenly you have your amazing wife and your beautiful children, and it's so energizing. You know, it's just like, this is your purpose. This is why you're doing this. And it's kind of both at the same time. And it's actually, honestly, I wouldn't want to do it another way. I don't know how to do it another way. It's a good motivator for sure. Yeah,
I love that. Have your children influenced your perspective on animal care or your approach to client communication?
Those are good points. Yes, definitely. Our pediatrician, and I keep trying to convince our pediatrician to become a vet, and I don't know why I keep doing this, but he's so sweet and he'd make a great vet. But he always says that veterinarians and pediatricians essentially have the same job.
Yeah.
And that is, how do you restrain wild, small creatures? How do you minimize their stress, making sure they get a treat at the end of their scary procedure? And pediatricians can't just, like, sedate them. Like, they can't just give them a shot and sedate them. Like, that's wrong. So they can't even work with that. They have a harder job. So for sure, watching my pediatrician with my kids has been interesting. And I definitely use parenting philosophy when I talk about client communication. And I already talked about this a little bit. My friends are always like, "Don't you dare gentle parent me."
Actually, we love it.
I think they do love it. And I always gentle parent everyone. Connect and redirect, man. It's like you're having a hard time. It's like connect with that person and then redirect them to the actual point of the conversation. Like, what are we talking about? Are we trying to make sure your pet gets the best care? Are we trying to stop our friends from arguing about something ridiculous? Connect and redirect. Let's move on. But first, you got to get that connection, deep emotional connection with people, so that they actually care when you tell them that you need them to put your pet on this medication because it will be helpful for them or whatever. So that's important for sure. I think that it's definitely colored the way that I respond to people.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's a superpower, really. Connect and redirect, but you do it so well. We literally did this right before starting this episode. We literally had a conversation where I was like, Emi, I need to tell you about something that I'm really upset about. And she was like, I really hear you. I understand you. And then redirected me to something that I could do to empower me in the situation. So I find that very on the nose that just happened in light of what you're talking about. But yeah, I think that's really awesome. And I see you do it not only in our interactions, but also with other students. And I can see how that's going to be really great for you when you work as a veterinarian with clients. So I'm going to take a note out of your playbook, hopefully. What kinds of support systems have helped you manage your dual roles as a student and a parent?
Huge shout out to my parents.
Yeah.
They are a huge support system. And my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law used to live 10 minutes, and now she lives an hour, which is kind of a big change for all of us. My parents are in Florida, so, they're not close, but they constantly will fly up and help us out. Honestly, when things are crazy, they will come. They came this summer when I was gone.
Yeah.
For 6 weeks out of this summer. My poor wife and children. It was a lot. But yeah, my mother-in-law comes up and helps out with the kiddos still, and my parents are always ready to financially support us if that needs be as well, because obviously it's really tricky being in vet school. And then my mother-in-law used to babysit for us when I was doing all the prereqs as well. And so she's really close with both of the kiddos from that experience. And so she continues to come and hang out with them. And shout out to my friends. My friends, you guys are all my emotional support animals. Like, I constantly just complain to my friends when everything is stressful, and they are like, that I hear you, but calm down. Like, please calm down.
You don't even complain, though. You're really not complaining.
Oh, yeah. You remember yesterday when I was, like, super anxious for no reason, and everyone was
It was the full moon. We talked about
That's this. Right. It was the full moon. That's right. That was what caused us all to be super anxious.
I also had a day yesterday. And I was like, oh my gosh, look outside. There's a full moon.
It is. It was really dramatic.
Correlation there.
For sure.
But no, you definitely don't complain. I feel like we have a good friendship, us and our other friends too, where we can be like, I'm just feeling really anxious right now, and then we're like, let's talk about it. Connect, right? That connect aspect. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I feel that. So I am glad to have you as part of one of my dear friends. So to close, I'd love to hear your reflections on your journey so far and what advice you'd offer to others. So what advice would you give to non-traditional students or career changers who are thinking about entering the veterinary field?
I would say that a lot of people like to tell you to, like, just do it, like, just jump and change careers. I want to tell you to, like, go slow and relax and think about it and make sure you know, like, the actual physical real life steps that are required to get there. Like, even just write them out.
Yeah.
Like, literally, I'm like, start taking this class. Mm-hmm. Like, make sure that you know exactly what you're going to have to do, the financial investment required, the time commitment required, and make sure you know what's required of you before you quit your day job and decide to become a veterinarian, because school is 4 years, and you do have to figure out how to survive your prerequisites if you don't have a science background. And then some schools won't accept that, just heads up. Virginia, Maryland is awesome because they do accept you going back and doing community college prerequisites. Not all schools will accept that. But if you are able to, you can do that. You can go back and get your science-y prereqs, but definitely just make sure that you know what is expected of you when you're going to have to submit that application before you throw your career away.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's worth it. If this is the career you want to be in, you need to figure out what the steps are and figure out how you can do it, because vet med is incredible. It's definitely where I need to be.
Yeah.
And it is honestly never too late. That's what I keep trying to tell people. Even if you're 50, it's never too late. I don't know, maybe when you're 70, it could be too late. But, like, if you're 50 or 60, change careers. Like, do it. But figure out the steps needed. Go slow and think about it before you make the leap.
I love that advice. And for anyone listening who's hearing it's never too late, but is still not believing it, we have classmates who are 40, 50, and we actually have a second year who's 60 years old. So there are people literally sitting in veterinary school right now who are that age. So that means that if they can do it, you can do it too. You just have to be brave enough to take a chance and go for it. Great advice. Last question for you. What advice would you give to any of our first-year students after taking their very first exam as a veterinary student?
Okay, so I feel a bit like a hypocrite because I'm going to tell them something that I can't do yet. But your grades don't matter as long as you're passing. And they don't define you as a person. That is so hard for me, and it's really hard for, I think, a lot of people, especially the vet med kids who are used to getting A's, or at least I am. Not anymore. I don't get A's anymore. It's like not a thing. Thanks, vet school. It destroyed it. But you can't expect to do perfectly all the time in vet school. You just need to pass, especially at Virginia, Maryland. Again, other vet schools have different requirements. Virginia, Maryland, it's like you pass your class, it's pass, fail, you move on. You get as much knowledge as you can. You're doing well. Find your friends who are going to motivate you and help you study. Especially encouraging you to actually be your best version of yourself in class, in clinics, and in your career when you get out. So I think that's important. And you belong here, no matter what.
great advice. That literally, the podcast that I just released yesterday, same thing. I said, I don't do this yet, but please don't let your grades define you. I'm still working on it, but at least I'm trying.
Oh my gosh,
It's all about progress, not perfection. And like you said, just try to gain as much knowledge as you can in every single class. Well, Emi, you have given us some incredible advice today, and I'm just honored to know you and be friends with you. So thank you for sharing your time with us today, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. I really enjoyed talking with you today.
Thank you, Grace.
And with that, my name is Grace Gaynor, and I just interviewed Emi Jones, and we are
Scrubbing Out.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Scrubbed In, the DVM Journey. Thanks for tuning in and being a part of our community of future vets and animal lovers. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. It helps others find the show and join the conversation. And if you have any questions or topics you'd love to hear about, feel free to leave us a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep scrubbing in, and remember, the journey to becoming a DVM is one step at a time.